how to use equations to find the value of x and to find the angles, measures of missing angle in a diagram. This is still lesson 11.1. First thing you would need to do is determine the relationship between the angles that are shown. Then you will use that information to write an equation and solve it to find the value of x. And then if it asks us to, plug x back in to find the measure of the angle. So let's give this a try. The question says to find the measure of each angle. When we say each angle, we are just talking about the two here that are labeled. So we already know that this angle is 22 degrees. We need to find the measure of this angle. We could find the measures of all of the other angles as we learned yesterday, but in this case, we just really are interested in the two that are labeled here. So first thing we need to do is determine what's the relationship between this angle here, that's 22 degrees, and this angle that's 6x minus 20 degrees. These are corresponding angles. So that is step one, is to know what is the relationship. And then you need to know what does that relationship tell you about the measures of the angles. And we said that if it's corresponding, they are congruent, which means they're equal to each other. The second thing we want to do is use that information to write an equation to show whatever we determine the relationship to be. So if they are equal to each other, then we need to write an equation to show that. So 22 is equal to this angle that's marked as 6x minus 20. They're equal to each other, so I put an equal sign between them. Now I solve that by adding 20 to both sides and dividing both sides by 6 to get a value of x of 7. Now the question says find the measure of each angle. X equals 7 is not the measure of the angle, it's just the value of x. So we do here need to take this expression, 6x minus 20, and we need to replace the x with a 7. So 6 times 7 is 42. 42 minus 20 is 22 degrees, which is what we were hoping for because we said they were equal, and this one was 22. So what that means is that we wrote the right equation, we solved it right, and we plugged it back in correctly. Let's give another one a try. What is the relationship between this angle and this angle? These are vertical angles, which we learned a few days ago are equal to each other. So our equation for this problem is going to look just like the one we looked at a second ago. We're going to say if they are equal to each other in measurement, we're going to put an equal sign between the two expressions, 124 and 14x minus 16. When we solve it, by adding 16 to both sides, we get 140 equals 14x, and then dividing both sides by 14 gives us x equals 10. In this problem, that's all it asked us to do. It didn't ask us to identify the value of this angle. Just to make sure we did it correctly though, I'm going to plug that 10 in anyways to make sure I do in fact get 124. So 14 times 10 is 140. 140 minus 16 is 124, which means that I got the right equation and I got the right value for x. Find the measures of angles UTS and STV. This is a bit different than the ones that we just did. The relationship between UTS and STV is not vertical, it's not corresponding, it is two things. They are adjacent and they are supplementary. This adjacent relationship is helpful, but not in the way of telling us what kind of equation to set up. because adjacent just tells us they're next to each other, but it doesn't tell them anything about what their measurements are. So what we need here is actually the supplementary to tell us something about the angles and their measurements. Supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees. So we need to show that this angle here and this angle here add up to equal 180 degrees. So our equation is going to look like this. 3q plus 15q plus 18 equals 180 degrees. They're not equal to each other, but they add up to equal 180 degrees. When we solve it, we can combine our q values of 3q and 15q to get 18q plus 18 equals 180. And then once we do that, we solve by subtracting 18 from both sides and then dividing both sides by 18 to get a q value of q equals 9. Again, double checking the question, it's asking not for the value of q, but for the measures of the angles, which we can't do until we know the value of q. So now we know q, and now we can find the value of UTS, since it's 3q is equal to 3 times 9, since q is 9, so that's 27 degrees. STV is 15q plus 18. Since q is 9, that's 15 times 9 plus 18. 15 times 9 is 135. 135 plus 18 is 153 degrees. In this case, since we know that they should add up to 180, we can double check to make sure that we did it right by adding those two answers and seeing if it actually does equal 180 degrees, and it does. So that means we did our equation correctly, we solved it correctly, and we plugged it back in correctly twice. Okay, for this example, find the relationship between these two angle measures, 2x and x. Recall that this means that this is a 90-degree angle, so these are, yes, they are adjacent, but like we said in the last example, adjacent doesn't help us with what we know about their measurements, so we also need to say that they are complementary, which means they add up to 90 degrees. So our equation is going to show us that. So this angle plus this angle equals 90 degrees. So we're going to write 2x plus x equals 90. When we solve it, 2x plus x is 3x. And then when we divide 90 by 3, we get that x equals 30. And again, double checking my question, it did not ask for the value of x, it asked for the measure of each angle. So that means we need to now plug that x value back in. So 2x is going to equal 2 times the x value, which is 30. 2 times 30 is 60 degrees. And then our second angle is just x. So since x is 30, then that angle is just 30 degrees. And then we can double check that 60 plus 30 does actually equal 90, which is what we were hoping for. Here are a few multiple choice problems to help you just practice setting up the equations. Which equation could be useful to find the value of y? Since these are alternate exterior angles, which we know are equal, B would be the correct option for this problem. Which equation could be used to find the value of P? Since these angles, A and B and K, are adjacent and supplementary because they make a straight line when you combine them, or a full 180 degrees, A would be the correct choice for this equation. Which equation could be used to find the value of x? Since these two angles are adjacent and they make a 90-degree angle, C would be the correct equation for this problem.